Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 6 of the Modern Game Podcast. This week, we plan to talk about winning and what does it take to win on Sorare. I think there's been a bunch of chat within the community this week about winning, and I think people potentially feeling they should be winning, but they're not. So the sort of general premise and thoughts I had around this conversation were around expectations. What does it take to win? I think, my example of myself is that outside of the competition, the one shot, it actually took me quite a long time to win regularly on Sorare main game and sort of step up into a competitive position. So I think I've got a really interesting point of view on this, but we're going to have to try and keep on topic because everything seems to have blown up today. I thought we were having a nice Friday, sort of roll into the weekend with a podcast recording and, sort of really, enjoy the weekend from a Sorare perspective. And then suddenly we've got a bunch of major DMPs and Sorare have dropped the fact that they're going to be covering the second leagues on us in basically next weekend. So trying to keep on topic today is going to be tough. But, let's start with yourself, Josh. How are you feeling?
Yeah, good. I'm annoyed about my U23 lineup. It looks like Anthony is not going to play at the weekend due to the transfer saga with Manchester United. I only had one U23 entry this week due to Nicholas Heddle not having a fixture at the weekend. So yeah, that looks dead, and it's a pretty smasher lineup. It's like Timber, Seiwald, Safanov, Anthony and Sesko. So yeah, that's very disappointing. Apart from that, I am good. I don't have any second division players myself. I didn't speculate on any moving forward, but I think some people are slightly upset that they can be played in All-Star and U23. I was sort of like, if any second divisions ever did come, I was always expecting that. I don't really think that obviously it's good they get their own regional division whenever that comes. They say this autumn, don't they? So, whether that is, I don't imagine it's going to be Game Week 300. I think it's like in the meantime they can be used in All-Star and U23, and then when they drop the second division league, or whatever they're going to call it, then they can be used in regionals as well. But yeah, I think that's definitely positive. And yeah, I don't really see why. I don't see how people are complaining that they can be used in U23 and All-Star. Like, every card in the game can be used in U23 and All-Star, so I don't see why these particularly should be different. I get it's second division football, but some of the second divisions, the championship is arguably we've just had the Elitesiren drop. If you stuck Rosenborg in the championship, would they finish top? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. But obviously,
Gyeongbuk or
exactly
Kawasaki
right.
Frontale into the championship, would they finish top? Probably not.
Exactly.
I suppose that it's quite interesting that you bring this up, because I feel like a lot of people are just unhappy with the concept of any change. And I think that this actually touches on the sentiment that I've seen this week with regards to winning and what it takes to win, but also the Sorare data subscription. Like, that there was just like the most obvious thing that would be happening to that business at some point in the future, yet people still seem to be just upset about it because it is change. And I think like a lot of the stuff that people now are in Discord general being like, why are they going to include in here? But are they any weaker than the K League? No, really, like, honestly. And I think that there is just like amount of frustration and anger around change, and I think that this does play into where what does it take to win, because what it takes to win changes, it evolves over time. Like, if you like, it's for people to simultaneously want their players' values to rise, but then also to be surprised that Sorare has got more competitive. Like, that's the sort of, like, if I boil down the sentiment, I've seen like a few, quite early adopters this week getting frustrated and selling their galleries. But then you have to question Like, have they adapt? Have they evolved? Have they, changed their strategy as a result of the changing gameplay dynamics? And the changing gameplay dynamics isn't just the number of teams covered, the number of managers playing, but also the game formats. I initially didn't really have any focus on limited. I sort of dipped in for a little bit, dipped back out, and then when they reintroduced specialist, I came straight back in because I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, there's a really good opportunity to win here. It's obviously highly competitive. There's a lot of luck involved, but that was a decision that I made, which goes against my initial plan of not stepping into limited. So I feel that that there needs to be an element of flexibility, and it feels like the frustration seems to come from the user base who are actually quite rigid in their approach and have just kind of sat on cards for a long time and are expecting them to yield. Whereas you can, what does it take to win? An element of it for me is knowing when to sell. There's certain players like, I've sold players last week to strengthen lineup, which has then helped me win in midweek. Yes, I sold that card for under the last sale. But with the money that I generated, I then bought a card that's won me a player in midweek that is worth more than the difference between what I sold in order to generate a quick sale. So I think I'd be really interested in your perspective on it, because I think a core part of remaining competitive is ensuring flexibility and ensuring that you adapt to the changing dynamics of the gameplay. And I think that, a key part of that is you don't see, if you compare it to football in real life, you rarely see, let's exclude Bayern from this, but you rarely see teams dominate continuously.
I think one thing, not necessarily linked to changing gameplay dynamics, but something I've always realized or placed greater value on than the rest of the player base, I think, is that you've always got to be buying new cards to give yourself the best chance of winning. And I don't mean actually, maybe that's the wrong way of putting it. You've got to buy cards that not many other people can have if you really want to win tournaments. It's great running a full Club Brugge stack, but realistically they've got 250 cards of each player now on the platform from Club Brugge, right? So if you're doing that, the chance of someone else doing the same as you is actually pretty high, right? So it's the same with picking lottery numbers. If you're picking a very common number, a very common sequence of lottery numbers, the time it comes in, you're going to have 50 other winners as well, right? If I don't know the popular sequences, I don't play the lottery, but I have heard before of the lottery numbers coming in and then lots of people having to share a relatively small amount of money compared to what the total lottery sum is. And I think you can draw some similar analytics towards Sorare. I very much like buying cards which are scarce, so that when they do well, that I can be one of only very few people that can win, right? And that has been sort of how I've managed to win in SO5 previously. My Challenger D3 wins. One of them was with a half Rapid, half Spartak Moscow stack when Austria first dropped. So not many people had Rapid Vienna cards at all, and they won a game 5-0. And I had the strikers from their team. They both scored 100. Grull and Chenkara at the time. And then they propelled me to a Division 3 win, and that is always something I've placed massive value on. The ability to play a card which not many other players can have. And again, one of the reasons why I buy lots of Russian cards, because they're not being minted anymore, and because there's very few mints altogether. Maybe not so much for the Zenit players, but again, they're not being minted anymore. When Zenit do really well, or when a certain Russian Premier League card does well that I have, I know that not many other players can have it. And it's almost like comparing it to Division 1. YNWA had ridiculous success last season running a full Liverpool stack in Unique Division and Champion D1, right? Because he literally was the only player that could have a Liverpool stack. He bought all the Liverpool cards. So, when they did well, he was the only one that could win, right? And, unless someone else did also amazingly well. So like, you know, when we talk about what it takes to win, not necessarily gameplay dynamics, but I think scarcity is like the biggest thing. And it's one of those things I always say to people is like, if you have more scarce cards, you have a better chance of coming first. If you have a team which sticks up 500 points, you're going to do well. You know, you're obviously going to come very high in the leaderboards. You're going to get your star prize, etc., or whatever. But if it's a very popularly selected team, you know, last year, if we have a look at, you know, say Pasveer, Martinez, Lissandro Martinez, Hans Vanaken, Tadic, and one other. You know, if you play that team's going to knock you 500 points out lots, or it did last year. But loads of other people were running the same team. Well, not loads, but, you know, quite a few people. And again, this effect is compounded at limited level. If there's any people playing limited that are listening, you know, you need to be able to have the cards that can get you up to the big scores. So I'm not saying just go and buy the scarcest cards possible, even if they're rubbish, because, you know, obviously you still need to have players available. And if you look at my gallery, I've got a bunch of Ajax players and I stack Ajax regularly. But I always try and make sure there's a bit of a differential in my lineup, which has a scarcity based element that not many other players can have. And therefore, you know, when it does hit, I don't come 6th or 7th or 8th or 9th or 10th. I come 1st or 2nd or 3rd, basically. And that is one of the things, and I still think it's massively undervalued in the game today. Like, loads of people get on your SO5 simulators, you know, Sorare Data have them now when you're doing a lineup builder. This team would have scored you X amount of points in X game week, and, you know, that's great. And lots of people, I think, build lineups like this and think, you know, if I can hit 500 points, I'm going to be winning or getting a podium, etc. But really, what, you know, you're not playing against a metric or yourself, or a game. You're playing against other managers, and in order to win, you have to beat other managers. And if they're playing the same cards as you, then that becomes really difficult. So if you can find an edge where you have cards which you know, are very powerful, but also not many people can have, then it gives you a huge edge, I think, in SO5. I think the most relatable example I can think of this recently, we're both in a chat with Nepenthes, and he has a super rare Vavro, the only one on the game, right? There's no other super rare Vavros. And he got an offer from Gamble or someone, I think it was, you know, a decent offer, just over like 3.5x the rare or something. And he was basically like, do I sell this or do I keep it? And I basically said to him, you know, like, that card is a smasher at the minute, like, you know, in his new setting, transferring to Denmark from Lazio. And you've got the only one, like, no one else can have it. So when he scores 100, like, you know, that's such a big edge on the rest of the competition you're playing in, whether it be in Challenger or an All-Star, etc. So I think that's the sort of the main point that I was thinking when it comes to, like, what it takes to win. When it comes to changing gameplay dynamics, like you mentioned, sorry, I've gone a really long way around answering your question. But when it comes to that, I think you're absolutely right. Like, my initial assessment on the new specialist tournaments, the underdog, the specialist, was like, oh, you know, I want to stay away from these and see what the score is with them before I actually go into them. And, you know, I'm still going to prioritize the main SO5 tournaments. And I think that's probably like a wrong summary for me. Like, if you can get in ahead of the rest of the competition, have an edge in a new competition, and evolve to that competition, then I think that's a positive SO5 play to do. Like, one of the chaps, I'm really sorry I forget his name, but that went to the London meetup, won I think the first or the second underdog rare, and won a Cameron Carter Vickers rare for winning the underdog rare. And in his tournament, there was 406 entrants in underdog rare that week. It was a weekend. It was like the first or second edition. How many entrants are there going to be for underdog rare this week? Now people have realized that you can win star rare cards. You don't need a goalkeeper. 4,000 maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
maybe more.
So, you know, what it takes to win is very much, I think I sort of agree with your summary of, like, it's evolving. It's trying to find opportunities within SO5 to do something a bit different to what other people are doing. And yeah, you know, really capitalize on having an edge, on whether it be with scarcity, with like my, you know, my example, or just, you know, seeing that there's a gap in one particular tournament and saying, actually, you know, I'm going to focus on that. And again, similar to what you did with Specialist Limited, when you won, didn't you?
I did, yeah, I did. It was interesting. And you say about like level of competition is I won in a week where Sorare didn't list the prize pool in the game. It was listed on medium. And straight away I was like, people are going to overlook this because they look on Sorare and it shows 0 prizes.
Yep.
But they'd communicated the prizes elsewhere. So I really targeted, and I actually put a bit of ETH in to go at that division that week. And I went for players like Obliakov and Isidore specifically for that differential purpose. Because I was like, I know if they hit, very few people will have picked them. Combined with the fact that I think people will overlook this division this week because they can't see like what's right in front of them in terms of the prizes. So yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, a win's a win. I will take it, but I did definitely win because that division was overlooked that week. And but again, like the reason I went for players like Isidore and Obliakov is because I observed this. Essentially, what you've been talking about is differentials being more important. The stat that I find crazy is that I have won more with Tiani Reinders in the last month than I have with Carlos Gil. Right? Because the issue is I normally play, and I've actually done it differently this weekend. I've put Carlos Gil in Global All-Star Rare, which no doubt PSU is going to be raging at, and he's going to call me a moron on Twitter. But the problem I've been having is that when Gil hits, and I'm playing him in Global All-Star Rare Pro, I'm going up against like 80 other Gils in Rare, and then like 20 Gil Super Rares. So like, you know, I've had weeks where like I've really hit, and like last week was one of them, and I won Diego Rubio, but I hit and got like 430, 440 points and came like 60th because Gil hit and he put like up 93. But then what you had in front of me was a bunch of other people that have got Gil with more experience or the Gil Super Rare. Yep. So, you know, even my strongest lineup isn't strong enough to beat the competitors when Gil hits. So then I've been like, you know, I've had better success with Gil, putting him in America 3. I don't think I'll ever put him in America 4, but I put him in Global 4 just because I'm like, okay, well, the problem I'm having now is like, it's not about him, it's about the rest of my lineup. And I think that this is one thing that is like massively overlooked, because I saw the other week, like someone posted a picture of like the top 20 in Limited All-Star, and they're basically all the same team, albeit with slightly different XP on it. And I'm just like, you know, that's great. And like people can be like, oh, I can't believe, you know, they've won. And like, you know, but then at the same time, knowing that people behave like that, Mbappe DMP'd in the first game of the season. So if you are playing against the grain, you know that in weeks like that will happen like this, then you've got significantly more opportunity because you've gone for a differential, because you know, like today we were talking about it, like Anthony and Masiala out this weekend probably wipes out like, you know, 20% of the strongest teams that were entered in under 23. And Pacano, yeah, exactly. And what you sort of see is like the differential can be your friend. And I think that the differential, we will see it becoming more and more important as the user base grows. And I think like what you can see happening in Limited now will be to a lesser extent seen in Rare, is that, you know, we're now on what, our 5th season of Belgian League cards. So
yeah, 2018-19 is
so we're on our 5th season of Belgian League cards. Players like Hans Vanaken have been around for every season. So if Hans Vanaken smashes, there could be feasibly like 300 other rares out there, probably played in Challenger. And this is the thing, is like that is something that you know you have to consider. And it's funny when people were really complaining about the Limited the other week, is I'm like, that is a manifestation of their behavior, in the sense that everyone wants the same team.
Does the same thing,
everyone does the same thing. So then it's like, okay, well, if you know that's happening, then there is an opportunity to go against the grain, because there will be times where, you know, Mbappe is rested. There will be a week where Haaland undoubtedly gets an injury. And, you know, you look at the sort of the behaviors that you see, is there is an opportunity to be competitive, to go against the grain, because you don't need to win every week to do well on Sorare. But I feel like sometimes I see it as like there is almost like an expectation or an entitlement from people that they should be winning every week. And I'm like,
sure.
that's where I find it really interesting, because actually it's not like, unless you're coming in and spending an absolute fortune, the expectation of winning every week is frankly delusional. Like, it's just not realistic. So then, and I sort of see it like this week with the complaining about Sorare data, is it's like this sort of like free money complex of like, Sorare isn't meant to be easy. Like people, no doubt someone's going to come into Twitter and be like, oh, but you've complained about rewards in the past. And I'm like, yes, I've complained about rewards, but in the sense of like quality and consistency of the pools. I've never thought Sorare should be easy. I think it should be attainable. I think, like, you should feel like you have the chance to win, but at the same time, it really is determined by your strategy and how you play the game. And I think the sort of crazy thing in seeing like all the comments this week about people not winning and then the cost of Sorare data is, I don't know. Like, I was sort of like, what is your level of expectation? Because, like, frankly, I put a ton of time in the game. Like, if you look at like the size of my gallery now and the time I put in the game, like, I'm putting in a lot of effort, and I still don't have expectation that I should be winning every week. Like, I'd like, I would like to hope that I could win a sort of T1 a month, but that all depends on a lot of variables, and like sometimes luck comes into it. Like,
Sure.
Some people will get lucky this week because Anthony and Musiala being out has wiped out a bunch of the strongest under 23 teams. Is that going to be replicable every single week? No. But if you win a decent prize and you reinvest that into, you sell that and reinvest that into your team, then you have become stronger because of it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where, like, you sort of butts into it a little bit, is if you are someone that tries to follow the grain and buys the most popular players that everyone else wants, is their price becomes inflated as the nature of the scarcity. And like some of the prices are wild. Like, the differences in limited of like the most popular players and other players that kind of score similarly but is not as well known is frankly insane. So then I'm like, if people are like, oh, I can't believe I'm not winning with this, and it's like, well, okay, we've got you've paid way over the odds for an identical lineup that hundreds of people are also playing that weekend.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, what I suppose, like, it'd be interesting to talk to you, because I think we both joined at a similar time but took slightly different approaches. Whereas I kind of went rare in all leagues. You focused more on super rare and with a real sort of laser focus on the European leagues.
Yep.
We've been around for a similar time. We've taken different approaches. But I mean, what are your expectations? Like, and what do you think that you've had to do or you've had to change to remain competitive? Because I feel like I'm winning more now than I did when I first started. But that just, I think a big part of that has come down to experience. And I've been quite ruthless with like how I want to build my team and selling off cards that I'm not using. And like, I just be really interested to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize you joined the platform 5 days after me, so we literally have been like literally the exact same amount of time. So yeah, that is really interesting. So one thing I think I've always done is gone against the grain a bit, and I don't. This maybe sounds like I'm saying I'm the best Sorare manager in the world. I'm definitely not. It's just sort of the way I've done things, because I've realized, like you say, especially it's compounded in the limited competitions. But I thought initially when I started playing the rare ones, if I'm just running the same teams as everyone else, I'm never going to win. And my goal always in SO5 is to come first. Like, I'm just one of those people that just likes to come first. Basically, it's only ever happened 3 times. But so the main thing I do and still continue to do is play my best lineups in Challenger. So lots of people will give me grief for this. PSU again will probably be saying, "What the heck are you doing?" but yeah, like loads of people say, you should always play your best lineups in All Star or U23 or whatever because they've got the biggest prizes, and I get that, and there's no denying that you can obviously win the best prizes in those competitions. However, if the majority of people are playing their best cards in those divisions, they are therefore more competitive, and also I've got, without again trying to sound like an idiot, the best challenger cards in my opinion. I've got Zenit stacks, Ajax stacks, Celtic stacks, Salzburg stacks, you name it, a lot. Okay, so if I'm playing the best cards that I think is possible in Challenger, and someone else has got the same cards, they're more likely to play them in All-Star because they're the absolute smashers, right? And it's really then me versus like the top 1% of the platform, which has all the cards 6 times over and therefore can play whatever cards they want in whatever division, right? There's not, the top whales really don't, they can play. They've probably got like 3 Malcolms this week who's playing Torpedo Moscow, one of them being Super S. They can just stick them wherever they want, right? But for the majority of the platform, they have to make a decision. Do I play this Jurian Timber in Challenger or U23 or All-Star? And for me, for the most part, I'll play him in Challenger because that's the way I like to roll. And when he scores 100, less managers will have him in Challenger than they will in U23 and in All-Star. And the effect compounds with a player like Timber, who is U23 eligible as well. And I do run an awful lot of U23 cards in Challenger. This week alone, my Challenger D3 team, or Challenger Rare Pro team, has Luka Sucic and Fernando Super Rare in. So yeah, like, those cards would normally be used in U23 by the managers. I'm putting them in Challenger so that, less people can have them there. And if they do hit big, again, it comes down to my scarcity sort of element there. But yeah, then I can win. So yeah, I think that's like the main thing that I do is sort of go against the grain, and etc. And yeah, I think it's a good point you make. Like, I've always just stuck to playing with challenger cards. I've had initially, you mentioned how you've got better as you've been on Sorare longer. That's definitely the case with me. Like, originally I bought like Luis Suarez and some other Thomas Partey, some other champion cards, and ran them in All-Star with a bunch of challenger players, and had really, really, really low success rate. So yeah, I started in, just have a quick look at this. I started in February 21, and my first win was in game week 146, which is maybe like March, actually. But then I didn't win anything else until game week 152. But to be fair, that's probably the start of the next season. But yeah, my win percentage on Sorare data, which I don't tend to look at particularly with too much seriousness, because at the start of the game I had a lot of weaker lineups than I have now, and also I play a lot of lineups. Like this week, I've got a challenger team with 4 super rares and 1 rare, and I'm not even sure that the 4 super rares are going to start. So that's probably dead. So I play a lot of lineups with like lottery tickets that if they hit, fantastic. If not, it doesn't really matter. So but yeah, my win percentage has sort of gone up from like 9% to 16% in like the last 8 months, basically, and I've been on the platform 20 months. And I think the main reason for that is I've gained an experience. I've learned how to set a better SO5 lineup. I've learned what areas of my team I need to plug instead of stopping buying challenger forwards that I would like the look of, etc. I've been more I've had a better thought process about what purchases I'm making and therefore putting into my teams. And yeah, just always trying to sort of optimize the most effective lineups. And I think that is sort of the best lesson on the way to win, is to optimize your SO5 lineups. Like, don't play as many lineups as you possibly can, because ultimately you're diluting the strength of your gallery to try and play as many tournaments as possible, and therefore you're playing a weaker range of cards. Identify key areas which you think you're really strong in, and build your best teams. And if that means you're only putting out 1, 2, 3 teams a game week, but you could be putting out 5, that's okay, because the 1, 2, 3 are going to have a much better chance of winning a top prize than 5. You might put out 5 teams and get 2 tier 3s, but if you'd put out 2 teams, you'd have won a star prize. And that's again, that's the sort of the thing that you should, in my opinion, really be sort of knuckling down on, creating a team which is well composed, that you think is, has a really good chance to smash and hit yourself high up that leaderboard.
Honestly, like that was one of the biggest learnings that I made is early days. I spread myself way too thin, and I'm thinking like, oh, but I don't want to leave that guy out because that guy could do really well this weekend. And then by doing that, I ended up having like one good guy in 5 lineups rather than 5 good guys in one lineup. And the amount of times I'd be within like 5 points of a prize, and then I'd look at another lineup and be like, oh, if only those two had been in together. So yeah, I think that was a big learning for me. Is like, it's kind of like similar vibes to like knowing when to sell, is knowing when to leave someone out. And like, I've left some fairly strong players out this weekend, like just because, like not to brag, but like because of the depth of the gallery. But it would have been very easy for me to spread them out and go thinner. And like, I've changed my strategy this week because my super rare goalkeeper that I normally run in D3 is Lanzalotta of AAAJ in Argentina. And because of the weird timing, it's like they're actually next midweek. So rather than like try and force the issue, like I've left out some quite good super rares this week and I've left out some good players, but because I was like, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm spreading myself too thin. So I've gone with like what I'd consider 3 competitive lineups that I think could go for sort of tier 1 and be in that sort of mix. Because, in all honesty, to win a division or to win a star, you need a lot to go in your favor. Like you need a huge amount of luck. Like you really do. Like you can kind of, try and create your own luck and put yourself in a really good position. But I don't really ever go into a weekend or a week midweek with any expectation of a star price. Like I'm aiming to be like T1 or above. Like if I can get that, then I'm really happy. And like you'll sometimes get lucky and you'll get a star. But that is honestly, I think like not talked about enough is like being really critical with yourself and with your gallery, because it's very easy to dream and be like, oh, but if I put another one in, then I've got another chance of winning another prize. And there's very few people on this game like that have the opportunity to like, not the opportunity, like, hang on, sorry. There's very few people on this game that have the strength of gallery to be competitive in all of the divisions.
Every region.
Like, you're probably, honestly, like, there's less than 100 managers, realistically.
Yeah.
Like, and even like our gallery sizes, realistically, we could probably get out 3 or 4 per week lineups that we think, actually, that's in with a very good chance.
Yeah, like, I think I sort of look like my Challenger D3 and Challenger Rare and Rare Pro and All-Star Rare Pro are like lineups I try to make as good as possible, and then sort of go from there.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well, is like, and also like, being adapting to the circumstances, because like I like to prioritize Challenger. Like Challenger is one of the divisions that I focus on. I really follow the Belgian league. But this weekend I've not got Anderlecht.
Right.
I've not got AZ. So I was looking at like, who do I have? I've got the guys from Graz, which actually, like, the defensive stack at Graz this week is fairly solid. But then midfield, I was lacking hope. I was lacking and I was looking at it and I'm like, why? Like, I shouldn't just set a challenger team for the sake of it, because in reality, we've got Ajax, Zenit, and Celtic all like primed to completely smash. I've not got players from any of those teams, so I'm just entering for the sake of it. So I actually, Challenger Europe was the one that I dropped this week. I was like, okay, well, I'll just drop that, and I'm then just using the goalkeeper and defender in All-Star and leaving out a bunch of players. But the alternative was to just put in 2 really half-baked sides into All-Star and Challenger, which are actually some of the most competitive divisions at rare level. So I think that's honestly like such an important point to think about, is like really know your own gallery. And I think like what it's been talked about in the past of like this quality over quantity, but what I find really, really interesting about a lot of the managers that I saw, like basically complaining about not winning this week. They had a load of cards. Like I'm talking hundreds of cards. But if you actually looked at the quality of those cards, they were all like, you'd sort of look through, you'd sift through a gallery of over 100 cards and go, oh, I don't really know, like, how am I picking two strong lineups out of this? And I think that comes back to the point of like really knowing your own gallery, knowing your strengths, and knowing when to sell, if that's the route you want to go down. Because there's different ways that you can be successful on the game. Like someone could consider winning, buying a load of cards for a young injured DNP goalkeeper, and when he starts, that he's going to suddenly accumulate in price. That is a form of winning. But I think what you almost have is like some people that get lost in the middle, where they are speculating on a ton of cards, but they've done so much speculating that they then don't really have very strong lineups. So the sort of week in, week out gameplay isn't very enjoyable for them because they're not really winning a lot. And you sort of question then is like, okay, well, is it worth selling off a bunch of these cards to have competitive lineups? Or am I still focusing on the speculate to accumulate strategy? Because they're ultimately different and they also kind of conflict with each other. Because for every card you're speculating on, that's ETH that you've tied up in a player that's never going to leave your training lineups.
Yeah.
So I think that's where like a bit of friction comes in as well. And I just thought it was interesting, like observing the accounts that were very vocal on this topic of the points required to win and not winning. Is I'm like, okay, well, yes, they're higher. Like I think it's natural to expect that Sorare was going to get more competitive as more people joined. Like the good times. For people that are like people, I think that like were early adopters, and I wouldn't call us early adopters because we joined right in the middle of that boom. I think people that had joined before us in the sort of time where you could buy like any card for £10 and you like would sell them for a lot more like 3 weeks later. That strategy is frankly useless now. That you can't just buy any card and hope that it will speculate, because it's just not the case. There's a lot more cards. There's a lot more people bidding on them. Like there's a ton of stuff happening. So I think, one of the things that I observed is that conflict between speculating and being competitive. And I think that, ultimately they are two different strategies. They're two ways of winning, but they are fundamentally at odds with each other. And I think like that's one area where I feel that you and I share a similar approach, in the sense that we're very focused on immediate utility. Like what can the cards that I have in my gallery, how can they help me win now? As in winning prizes and winning tournaments and being competitive. And I think that that's something that I've always been a real advocate for. And yes, I have, sometimes taken losses on players. I've sold them for cheaper than I maybe could have if I'd held on to them for another 6 months. But having players that are sat in my gallery just filling up training squads is not, it's not the strategy that I'm employing. And I think that's sort of a real important point, is that you need to be, everyone's not got a limitless pot of cash. We need to be able to move players on in order to remain competitive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think one thing that I've done wrong is I just hold U23 goalkeepers forever. And maybe it isn't wrong, but like Mantle, Verbruggen and Gorta, like there were times this postseason where they were all trading for Mantle like 1.2, Gorta 2 ETH, Verbruggen 2 ETH, and I've just held them all. And like you say, they're way down. It's in Mantle's price now. The last auction was 0.4 for Nico Mantle.
I should have sold him that week before the season.
Absolutely.
Pumped based on a friendly appearance.
Yeah. I think we spoke about this, didn't we? I was like, I'm tempted to sell him and buy him back, and never did. And I think, like you say, selling, when to sell is another one of those things which can really help you win, because if you're selling cards for the wrong price in a good way, then that can definitely go in your favor. You get to use the ETH, the opportunity cost of that. You get to use the ETH in a more positive manner to improve your lineup and therefore make yourself stronger. I think another thing on the flip side of that is like I was getting tons of offers when only Dynamo Zagreb, when only Croatia, Russia, and Denmark were back. I was getting tons of offers for my Zagreb players. I got like a 2.2 ETH offer for Josip Misic, Super Rare, and some offers for Lantratov, which were ridiculous. Astro Sarostra actually sold his Lantratov for like 0.96. When just on game week deadline, like with that lock when those leagues were back. And I didn't sell any of my cards because I wanted to try and win SO5. And I think that again is like another thing that people need to consider. How far are you willing to go to win? I saw on Twitter this past midweek, Tony Watt sold his Odysseus into the deadline, and ran 4 players in All-Star and got the threshold comfortably. He got like 320 points if he kept Odysseus. He got a clean sheet and won a tier 1. So, those decisions on when to sell a player and when not to sell a player, and how much you want to back your lineup. Astro got that offer of 0.96 for Lantratov and Snap sold him because he didn't have any other cards to go with him that game week. I didn't sell him because I had a full team of RPL players that I could roll with him and therefore win a prize. And did win prizes. So again, I think, do I sell now and reinvest or withdraw, whatever you want to do with the money, or do I keep the player and put him to work in SO5 and try and yield that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've done the same. And I know it sort of like builds upon our conversation about midweeks that we had, but I've been selling cards recently to free up money to buy for midweeks because I know that I've got 3 or 4 good players that all it needs is like to build out that team. You maybe need 1 player with a good fixture. So, I bought Hannes Delcroix for next midweek.
Yep.
I sold, who did I sell? Oh, Trezeguet. So I sold Trezeguet of Trabzonspor. I could have probably sold Trezeguet for a lot more if I'd held on to him because he's in, frankly, a really terrible run of form at the moment. But then I would have gone into a week with, 4 under 23 players, and the expected outcome of that would not be to win the division or not be to challenge for top prizes. So then actually by shifting out of Trezeguet and into Delcroix, I've suddenly now got a competitive lineup for next midweek where, in all honesty, there's only about 8 teams playing. So the chances of, 100 other managers having competitive lineups is fairly low. So yeah, I think it's always that trade-off in, deciding what to do and when, and being able to like stick with your guns on it as well, and sort of have conviction on what is the approach that you're taking, what is your edge, like how can you leverage the way that you play this game to increase your chances of winning. I think that point you made was brilliant. And like, specialists this weekend, I've jumped in and put in a player from the Norway Elistratton because I'm like, I don't think many people are going to dive into Norway players considering they've only just been put on the game. And I think like, particularly at limited level, having differentials is key. And I think like what's now as well is the amount of lineups that I've seen in Specialist Limited that have been killed because Tony Cruz is out injured is unbelievable. Because everyone went at Cruz as their like under 60 point player. Because I think he's like 58 or 59.
Yeah.
Great fixture. But again, like everyone went for Cruz. So now suddenly the Cruz is out. It's probably wiped out like 20% of the Specialist Limited teams this weekend. Like honest truth, like it is. And I think that sort of comes back to that point around your differentials, and I think it's absolutely going to become more and more important in this game.
Yeah, I think for some reason, Tex, the impact players section on the Game Week Center on Sorare Data isn't working. There's been a few times I wanted to pull it up in this pod just so we could have a look at like how many people play Gil in Gas 3 or Gas 4 or America, But But yeah, it's not working, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think you're always going to have those popular picks in specialist limiteds. And sometimes you need to go with that as well, right? You need to have a few of the popular picks. But then, like you say, if you can differentiate on even just one position, then, and if that position pops off, then that can make a really big difference for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that ties back into expectations because, we talk about the differential and helping you to win, but also, like you said, you kind of need to mark, there's an element of acknowledging the players that are going to score really well.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have to outscore them. And the reason that all these players are popular because they tend to consistently score very well. So if you are then developing a strategy that is on a lower budget, that is trying to go against the grain of, a completely meta under 23 side with Donnarumma and Haaland and Mbappe, then you need to acknowledge that that strategy is not going to win every single week. It's going to be those rare occasions that you get a DMP for one of the absolute hitters that your chances of winning have suddenly drastically increased. And I think that's like an important part of like setting realistic expectations for what this approach or what this strategy or what this budget even is going to achieve. And I think that it was really, really interesting looking at one of the lineups that I saw this week is, someone had the fortune of winning an Mbappe Limited.
Oof.
But Mbappe Limited is about 50% of their entire gallery value. And they are now running Mbappe every single week with a team of like players that you can't even be confident that they're going to start. So, that again is like a strategic decision. Like Mbappe might be your best player, but if you can't get a good team around him, then is there any point in owning an Mbappe? Would you not be better off selling that and diluting that ETH across 4 or 5 players so you have a competitive team rather than just like one complete smasher in a team of the CFDMPs essentially?
Yeah, that sounds incredibly poor SO5 planning to me. I don't know why you do that. Yeah, you have to have a balance.
You have
if
to
you're
have
gonna,
balance.
If you're gonna have, yeah, that makes no sense. Like, you just sell the Mbappe and have a decent side which can win when Mbappe doesn't score 100.
Yeah.
Would be my
absolutely.
thought process. Like, if fair play, if you get the Mbappe and you've already got like a decent, a solid U23 lineup, then yeah, you play him. But if you don't, then there's no reason to have one other than to say you've got a limited Mbappe, I suppose.
For the flex, keep it for the flex. I mean, you never the truth is you're never going to win. Like, you're not winning with 4 players. Like, that's happened. That's happened in the past. I remember the early days of Sorare when there wasn't that many people playing it. We're talking like 1,000 odd users. There were weeks, like particularly midweeks, where people would win with 4, or they would roll with a known DMP goalkeeper and just take a price.
Yeah,
like the volume of people on the game now these days are over. Like, that's happened. Like, you got lucky with the good times, but the good times are not going to keep rolling. Like, this is a more mature platform now. And there were weeks where like Sorare introduced that, like rightfully so, introduced that you needed to score at least a point to win a prize, because there were some really, really odd weeks. But I think like that's natural. Like, that's expected. That's like entirely reasonable for the like sustainability of the platform. So like I don't see like how you can be upset about that. I think what is important is DMPs. Like, you're not going to win if you have a single DMP. Like, so then a big part, like, and I know PSU is someone that really, really does this, and I try to do as much as I can alongside work, but like spending hours trying to get the most up-to-date availability news for your team, like it's grind, it's hard work, but like sometimes it's out of control. But it's an important factor, and sort of one that has to be sort of bluntly stated, is that the level of competition in the game now means that you've got to have all 5 players hit. Like, you're not going to win without, like, you're not going to win anything decent without a clean sheet. And I think that's fair. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
if
I
your
agree.
team haven't done well, they haven't done well. Like, I think, like, you know, I think that the scores required to win will evolve, but I think, like, there is an element of anchoring of people that have been around on the platform for a while in thinking, oh, well, I used to win with this. And it was like, okay, well, that was more a case of, like, the platform developing a maturity and being possibly too easy to win. Like, I do think there needs to be a balance, but I will credit to Sorare for adding in the underdog and the specialist, is that they have given, you know, people with smaller budgets more opportunity to win. They are more skill-based games, and I think the underdog was a, you know, particularly underdog rare every week was absolutely perfect for people that were targeting threshold with a common goalkeeper, because you were buying players that were typically 50-point
50.
average. So,
Yeah.
like, that, what Sura have done there, I really do credit them for it, because they've improved the diversity in terms of the people that win. And I think that that is good. Like, that is really good. Like, honestly, like, I actually think that it would probably be a bad thing long term if I was, you know, if we were all hitting stars every week, because it means that it's the
Yeah.
same people winning week in, week out. Like, don't get me wrong, there are certain, like, super elite managers who put a bucket load of cash in early days that are reaping the rewards.
Yep.
But what I think Sorare has done a good job of recently is diluting that by adding in specialists, adding
The
in
game
underdog,
restrictions.
adding,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. You're adding all of these different tournaments, and it puts more emphasis onto people that are willing to spend time rather than money. And I think that's been an important step. And, like, one of the things I do wonder about is, will we see, like, regional specialists and regional underdogs added in the future,
Yeah.
particularly with the amount of leagues we're getting added now and the amount of cards that
Mm.
are going to be available in this reward supply. That could be a really interesting next step, and one that like really does provide utility to the lower tier cards and an opportunity for a greater variety of people to win.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I wonder if they replace the existing tournaments or not, and that is something that Sorare will have to decide on, I suppose.
I
I
don't think
think,
they've shown today that they can add in new tournaments. So,
yeah,
yeah,
true.
underdog Division 2. Anyone?
Yeah, wouldn't that be exciting? I do think, like, I do wonder though if they do that, if they replace them, because I can see with the matchups we have this weekend, I can see there being like 420 points required for a Challenge Euro Rare Pro prize. Like, not podium, not star, a tier 2 prize. Like, I can see there it being 420. So, and I think people are, and, like, you know, at the start we've said, you know, people on Twitter have been angry this week about the points required to win. And I think if Sorare do want to lower that, their only option is to introduce restrictions into the leagues. So I wonder if they do it. I would be much happier if they introduced it as a separate league, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe. I mean, that would be a really interesting tournament. Rare Pro Specialist, where you have to mix super rare and rare cards.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, I do credit to them. Like, the new leagues have been good, and I have really enjoyed them. But yeah, I think that potentially brings our conversation to a close. I find it quite interesting. I have really enjoyed the chat today, so thank you ever so much, and
Yep,
we'll
thanks, mate.
see you next time.